one of us deserves the right to live equally. I think that's something most of us had already agreed upon. But do we? Wait, yeah. Okay. So an ordinary person like us can look after ourselves. We can go to school and we'll get a job after we graduate, maybe read a book some afternoon, or if we have enough time and money, travel somewhere. Sounds quite ordinary, huh? That's just living and having a little fun from time to time to ensure that life isn't at all boring and meaningless. But such life is not even imaginable to some. They probably can't take very good care of themselves. Wait, why isn't the page turning? Okay. Anyways, they probably can't take very good care of themselves. They also get to go to school, but not the type that prepare them for a vibrant future like ours do, but rather the type that teaches them how to behave normally and how to fit into this world they cannot understand. They can get a job, sure, let's say in a factory maybe, but that's just incredibly hard. And the question that's constantly bothering many of us, what should I do to make life worth living? It isn't a problem at all. I mean, how would that ever be a problem to people who are struggling to live? Guess who am I talking about? I guess you guys had seen it on the screen, so I'm talking about persons with intellectual disability, or as we call them, the PIDs. I know what some of you might be thinking right now, like, huh? And I know very well that this isn't the most interesting topic on earth, talking about a group of people who seem to be completely unrelated to you, or a group of people who to many exist only in videos or books. But stick with me first. Maybe by the end of the speech, you might get a very different idea of them. So first of all, what is intellectual disability? So as it says, it just refers to the lack of intelligence. Usually people with intellectual disability are slow or rather numb towards outer stimuli. They have certain limitations in terms of cognitive behavior and adaptive functioning. And many of them cannot communicate normally with others. For example, many of them can respond to others, sure, but not many can actually express themselves actively. And ID includes quite a large range of disorders, including Down syndrome, developmental delay, cerebral palsy, or many other more I have not yet mentioned. I'm sure you all have heard about at least one or two of them, maybe even joke about one, thinking it's something funny. But it's not. Not to the people who are suffering from it. Physically, along with certain types of intellectual disability comes, wait, this isn't the right PowerPoint, but wait. Along with certain types of intellectual disability comes developmental disorders, causing them pain, or maybe they just can't grow up. Mentally, as they're placed in a world in which they cannot understand, it's very easy for them to have certain types of depression, anxiety, feelings of loneliness, or other types of negative feelings. Socially, they're outcasted, often considered as a different breed by most people, despite it not being the truth. It's hard for them to get jobs. They're highly available to exploitation due to their challenges in communication and lack of awareness of their personal rights. And it's very hard for them to build relationships with others, as almost no one, except their families maybe, would be even willing to talk to them, not to mention to love them and care for them. I know it sounds pretty vague so far, so let me tell you about people who I've actually met. I've met PIDs who's 13 years of age, looking like an 8-year-old, behaving like one as well. I've met actual patients of Down syndrome feeling so passionate about life, having their own hobbies and dreams. I've met PIDs whose parent is also intellectually disabled, their destiny set the moment they were born. I've also met kids with both autism and ID who would respond to whatever you say, but always trapped in their own mental prisons. So now comes the question, who should be responsible for them being the way they are? People who want a boy in their family to so-called inherit the bloodline feeding the mother with medicines to ensure the infant is a boy, but poison the child as the drug is toxic. A couple that came from the same family, believing that true love can outstand any obstacles, decided to have a child of their own. Their children might have genetic disorders based on its parents' shared genes. Toxic families, they feed their children alcohol to shut them up, lock them up into dark rooms, and beat them up day after day until they can no longer function like a normal child. Or maybe just parents with awful luck. Their children just happen to be the way they are. Well, now I've said it. It's not your fault that they are the way they are. It's probably not your friends or families who are suffering from the conditions. So it's not your responsibility to care for them, huh? That might be right. But let's reflect on ourselves a little. Have you ever used the name of a PID to insult someone? Have you ever looked at one of them in disdain? Have you ever considered them to be inferior beings of your own? If there's a yes to any of these questions, believe me, it's very natural. I mean, it's one of the most primitive instincts for human beings to consider people different from ourselves to be inferior, but that is not right. Let me tell you a story. My granduncle was a soldier once. Well, this is a story my mom told me as he had passed away long before I was born, but that's not the main point. The thing is, after he came back from the military, he became an entirely new person. He grew to be hysterical, muttering to himself all day. He was living in a world that seemed to be absent from ours. He was behaving very much like a PID as his conditions were very similar. His intellectual abilities seemed to be utterly impaired by his life in the military. People no longer regarded him as a person. They started to disrespect him, considering him as an inferior being. But does being less intellectually able make him any less worthy to be respected? I don't think so. Because he, just like anyone else, is just a person deserving to be respected. The PIDs, too, are just people who share the world with you, deserving to be respected. They didn't choose to be the way they are, but their conditions are almost untreatable. But if you're willing to, there are still things we can do to help. There are still things we can do to help. The simplest and the most important thing is to respect them. I know it sounds very cliche and it doesn't sound very practical, but believe me, it has very practical impacts. For instance, most of the PIDs have very mild conditions, meaning that most of them are perfectly capable of simple labor. However, only 20% of them are actually in the labor force. Why? Have you guys ever thought of the problem? Well, the answer is workplace discrimination, just the same as workplace discrimination for other types of minorities. So basically, the employers don't trust in their abilities to accomplish their work, so they just won't be employed. Even under the best case scenarios, when they are actually employed, they're still highly available to workplace exploitation. I mean, in 2010, in Xinjiang, 8 PIDs were found to be working in a factory that has the worst of working conditions. They were paid with the lowest salary and they were beaten and unprotected. If the employers respected the PIDs, they would have had the opportunity to fight for a job to sustain their own living. If society respected them, they would have had the opportunity to get the legal protection they needed at the workplace, which they didn't. So that's why I said just respecting them would do a lot of help. But of course, if you're willing to, you can do so much more than this. You can learn about their conditions and make donations. You can talk to some of them and tell them about the world they don't get to see. Or you can try to raise public awareness about their conditions like what I'm trying to do here right now. And there is so much more that I cannot imagine here on stage that you can do. So here we are. You've listened to their struggles and their stories, and now the choice is yours. Where's my last page? You can just leave here today thinking, this is someone else's problem. I shouldn't be responsible for this. Or you can actually start to help, to call for respect, to care, to treat them as equals. Because at the end of the day, it isn't just about them. It's about all of us. How we treat people different from ourselves define the kind of society we are living in, define the kind of society we are building. We see the injustice right now, and we can change. Every human being on earth has the equal right to live. So let's start acting to help the PIDs. Let's start acting to build a society in which everyone, no matter their abilities, have the equal right to live a life filled with dignity, opportunity, and respect. Thank you.